Quick blurb. I'm a story career consultant at Grisanti Consultancy, Inc. I am an author of three books, Change Your Story, Change Your Life, Path to Your Success, Storyline, Finding Gold in Your Life Story, and TV Writing Toolkit. I am a former 12-year studio executive, and I am the writing instructor for Writers on the Verge at NBC. I have been there for 12 years as well.
Cool. And maybe at the end as well, you can just mention what Writers on the Verge is for
Yes.
some of the local people, because they probably don't know what that is.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah, so the theme of this was really, why use a script consultant, as opposed to just a reader. Like, obviously we're all very grateful for our friends and family and everybody who wants to help us and be supportive of our scripts. And one never wants to minimize, what readers do for us. But I'll just contextualize why I chose this. As a screenwriter, when I started, I literally knew nothing and nobody. And one person that connected me said, use a script consultant, didn't have a clue, got connected with you. And honestly, it's been the best experience I could ever have in terms of my script writing journey, which hasn't been that long, but I couldn't have learned more being in a classroom for a year than I have having had consultancy. So I'm a big advocate for it from a screenwriting perspective, but I'd just like to hear from you, from your point of view, why you think that writers should maybe consider a consultant over just a friend or a reader.
Yes, I love the topic that you picked because I have never talked about this before. So this is a great topic, and especially through your worldview of becoming a writer and what are some of the first things you can do to learn the most. In my experience, there are many readers who become very successful story consultants. So as you say, there is no minimizing. The difference between a reader and a story consultant is experience. The difference between, now you can have a reader who's been a reader for 20 years and they are going to have a similar amount of experience. Everything comes down to experience. So my experience is that I was a current programming executive for 12 and a half years. So what that meant was that I worked on 15 top primetime shows. I worked with the executive producers on staffing the writers, and I read up to 300 scripts a season, and it was my job to narrow it down to the top 25 or so and send them to my executive producers. I was very hands-on in the staffing process. So that helped me learn. And then I would work with the executive producer from story concept to outline to script to screen. And I would see my notes made all along the way. And I would also see what notes weren't made. So what the experience did was it trained me in story, not to mention that Aaron Spelling was my mentor for 12 years. So it trained me, and I would see him be a whiz in rough cuts where we would watch the rough cut after the episode filmed, and I would see him as a master edit. And so these experiences are what integrated into my story knowledge. And then when I became the writing instructor for Writers on the Verge, which is a diversity program at NBC, for 12 years, NBC would get probably 2,600 to 3,000 scripts. And the readers, who I value tremendously, they would hire readers, and those readers would narrow it down to the top 20, 30, and then they'd send them to me, and then I'd read those top scripts and write up synopses and write up what worked and write up, who based on just the writing I felt had a voice that was would be valuable and asset to the program. So that experience on top of my consulting for the last 12 years, where I've read probably 2,000 scripts since opening my consulting, just through that. So because of that experience, it takes you into the depth of the story well, and seeing story and watching story evolve, and then through being an author and having to create systems of stories so that I could create story tools so that writers can learn and get to an outcome. So that is what reflects experience. And then readers get their experience from reading and watching TV and film. And there are some readers that, according to what has happened in their life, that may grasp story at a stronger level. There are other readers that, just like writers who are brand new to writing, are brand new to reading. So that's just what you want to, when you're looking for a coach, consultant, reader. You just want to make sure that it's someone who has experience to get you to an outcome.
So experience in the industry, like
Yes.
actually as a working job. So I think maybe for me, that would be the biggest takeout is, lots of people can write and identify, good scripts, but if they've got experience in the industry, then that might be, a part of the decision-making process. Something you said to me once, because I realized that you obviously read a lot of good scripts and then maybe some not so good scripts. And that obviously takes a lot of energy. But how do you cope with that? When you get scripts that you're like, okay, well, this person isn't that great, but I still have to, tackle this.
I get asked this question all the time. People are like, what if the script is not good? I said, my background is as a current programming executive. And in current programming, when we would get the script, it often wasn't where it needed to be to hit the air. So we had to make that script where it needed to be ready to hit the air. And it's that training that makes me look at every script I get and admire the courage of the screenwriter to get the words out onto the page. And I look at it as, when you have a newer writer, it's just different levels of green with where their experience is, and it's teaching. And there's nothing more rewarding as a teacher than to see the arc of growth of watching a writer learn through the process.
So let's talk about that process. So a reader probably reads a script once. What is your process that you go through with your writers?
So, and I know you know this, I read a script 3 times. So I am of the belief that for every consult, I'm reading your script 2 times if it's an incredibly clear script, 3 times if I still have questions. So I read it the first time to see where the story is going. I make mental notes. Then I read it the second time, and if those notes are still hitting me, then I write them down. And I read it the third time to go into the subplots, because typically when I'm reading it the first 2 times, I'm really focused on the A story and the concept and the world and the themes. So then when I get to the third read, I'm looking at the subplots to see how the subplots are intertwining with the A story, the concept, the themes. I also, this is something I do with watching. I am a believer that when we watch the TV pilot, just as when we read it, that when we only watch it once and we only read it once, the brain can only grasp so much because so much information is being thrown out. The world, the characters, the idea of the engine, the idea of the central conflicts, the idea of can you see a full season of this if it's a limited series, or can you see 4 seasons of this if it's a regular series? So there's so many questions that you have to answer. And when I opened my company, what I recognized was my entire focus at that point was the TV pilot script. And the reason that it was the TV pilot script is because I recognized that the piece of material that can take a writer from being a non-working writer to a working writer is the TV pilot. I also recognize that the TV pilot script is the hardest script to write and write well. That's why you have so many executive producer level writers who've not perfected writing the TV pilot script or not sold a TV pilot because they've staffed their whole career, and the writing the TV pilot script is scary and it's hard, and it's hard to master at a level where it's going to sell. So this has been my focus from the start, and my mission to get people to the outcome of a sale. And I've had 88 pilots sold from the writers that I've worked with since I started my company in
So
2008.
so why do you think those writers, obviously you know those writers and you know their process,
Right.
and you also know your process. What do you think is maybe the common denominator, besides maybe some obviously talent, in getting those sold? Because a lot of story consultants don't have a lot of as well as many as you do that have sold. So what is, I mean, I think your system and your tools are exceptional, but what is that that maybe we don't?
Well, just as we look at character, with the character in fiction and the achievement of the goal, it goes into the internal as well as the external. So, with the writers that I work with that have gone to a sale, the internal is the emotional work that they do on believing that they're going to get to the outcome. So that emotional work, unless you do that, you're not going to achieve the external goal. So the number one thing that I noticed in writers that have gone on to make a sale is that they knew from the start that they were going to end up in that place. They knew that they were going to put the work in. That's the external. They put the work in. They, in with my system, whether it be the one-on-one consults, the 5 coaching consults, which is my most popular, the doing my StoryWise teleseminar that includes a massive amount of story instruction, because I have found that when you mix story instruction with one-on-one consult with the teleseminar experience, where I have working writers come in and listen to 5 pitches, so you get to hear the voice of the top level working writer. So when I mixed all of those, that is what led to the outcome happening. Now, also keeping in mind is that I've half the writers I work with are working writers because I come from the staffing world. I know a lot of writers, and I work with writers from staff level to co-executive producer level, and these are writers who have gone out there and made the contacts and have the managers and have the agents. I also, of the 88 pilots sold and the 6 that went to series, I also three of those six were newer writers. Now, they were newer writers, but they were newer writers that were extremely well connected. So they put the work in on the support staff for two of the three. One of them was connected through relationship, and that's what makes the difference. And of the 65 podcasts that I did earlier in my story consultant career on my website, you're going to hear a different story for every single person of how they got from non-working to working writer. And we explored the good, the bad, and the ugly in that process.
Well, I wasn't going to talk about this now, but it's, when you said, it's about that they were connected. I think for me, being obviously on the other side of the world, away from the hub of things, and I know many writers, obviously, even if you're not in LA, you may as well be as far as South Africa in many ways, so I know everyone identifies with this, but that's what I knew I have to try and bridge the gap on, is the connection. And that's, just a sideline thing, is why I've attended events like this myself, and where I met you, and why I want to do this, because I really just want to share that experience of the connection of people. And there's no silver bullet, but one just wants to start to get to know people in the industry and get your stories known and all of that kind of stuff. So I get that, but it is obviously a bit harder for us, on the other side of the world. But that's why we've got to take advantage of the opportunities that we have, I guess.
Like screenwriting safari,
Yes,
safari.
Yes,
That's exactly
like that.
what it is.
I'm so excited about it.
Yeah,
but
I am too.
I wanted to ask you something that Richard, he sent me a message, and he said to me, what is the one thing that that you look for in a pilot in terms of the beats? What are the main things?
Excellent question.
Because you also said the TV pilot is the most important. So what should those beats be?
The main thing that I'm looking for when I'm reading a script is, do they understand how to set up the series arc versus the pilot arc? Do they start with a compelling enough series setup to where I can imagine several episodes from this concept, if it's a limited series, or multiple years worth of episodes for a regular series? So I'm looking for a powerful series setup into the concept. Now, the concept, as many people know, in Hollywood, they say everything's been done. So the idea that everything's been done, what makes the concept different, and what so many writers are tapping into now, is the worldview of the central character. So the worldview of the central character can be put into any concept. And if that worldview, if the writer is willing to dive deep and go there through the development of the character arc, through the exploration of the earlier wound and or the childhood wound, how this comes out in a flaw that in Queen's Gambit, we see the flaw from the very start for drama. In comedy, we see the flaw from the very start in Dead to Me and in Fleabag. And the exploration of the engine of story for all three shows is revealing very systematically, strategically, the revelation of how that earlier wound impacts the present plot, and how the present plot gives an opportunity for the character to heal. So what I'm looking for is some sense of that connection of story. And what I often notice is a writer, you can, as a story consultant, we know you can teach structure. Structure is something that I would say most writers struggle with. And the value of understanding structure is that structure elevates emotion. So when structure is done correctly, then the emotional arc can work at a much higher level. And then the moving past the fear, as Eve and I discussed before we started this, is when you move past the fear as a writer. And another thing I look for in pilots is you take me into a moment that takes me by surprise. You dig deep, you go there. That will almost make me forgive anything. Like if I feel connected to the story in a very deep way and the structure is all over the place, then I'm still going to respond in a way that tells me I can get this writer where they need to be.
Oh, that's great. Obviously you mentioned the Queen's Gambit. We all have that top of mind at the moment.
Yes.
But it's interesting because obviously that it's almost like not much happened, but so much happened. And it was, it wasn't like huge action or whatever, but it was. But what I found
so much happened in the internal world.
Yes, that's what I mean.
External,
exactly.
Yeah. It's like, if you notice, there was no conflict with the actual playing of chess. The conflict was in the internal world and the flaw getting in the way of the central character getting to the dream.
Yeah, no, and also it's always interesting about, that writer tried to sell that pilot so many times and everyone said, oh, well, no one cares about chess,
30 years.
Yeah, gives us hope.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to look at some of the questions here.
Okay.
Ellie's got a question. When you look at a client script, do you like to see the pitch deck or the Bible with it?
I do. I do. I like any supporting document that gives me a sense of the voice. Let's say you're asking about images. It used to be that you didn't have to do images at all. Like the studio and the network, that was not something. As of lately, I do feel that many writers are getting a lot more creative with the pitch deck. So I think that there is a value if you can illustrate in a way that can sell your pilot and your concepts to the pilot, then yes, then I think you should use images in your pitch deck, but you don't have to.
Okay, cool. I hope that answers your question, Ellie. And here's one from Joanne. What advice do you have for writers who just want to sell scripts or show ideas versus being on staff? That's a good question. Is it even worth doing?
That is an excellent question. That is an excellent question. There are both of those kind of writers. You have the writer who is a staff writer, and it used to be in the agent world when I was starting my career in the early 90s, it used to be that the agents would say you had to staff until you were a supervising producer, co-executive producer level before you could start developing. That used to be the school of thought. Now, agents and managers are splitting their writers into the idea of you have the staffing writer and you have the writer who is just out there pitching and selling concepts. So you can make a career through just pitching original content.
Cool. Max has got a question. Can you talk about the difference between a character exposing their wound through their actions versus it being exposed by other characters?
Yeah, I mean, action is huge. So subtext is everything. You can absolutely have other characters be a part of the revelation process. Certainly, you can look at the antagonist as something that's going to pull out some of the revelation. You can look at the mentor character. You can look at the negative parent as a character that pulls out the idea of the wound and the flaw. I have seen shows, Queen's Gambit, where the wound is directly explored from the very start. We see the flaw first, we get the future moment, we get the consequence of the series, then we go back in time and we experience the wound in real time. And the value of that is you're putting us into the heat of the moment with the character. Honorable Woman did this as well with Maggie Gyllenhaal, and it was brilliant. It was probably a 2-page scene that took us to a depth with the character that we don't have. I've also seen shows like Dead to Me, like Fleabag, where we are seeing in action what the flaw is, which is creating anticipation on more information on the wound. So there is a tremendous value of many writers who will say to me, do I have to explore the wound and the flaw? And my answer to you is yes. If you want to sell your show, this is you have to be willing to go there. Now, granted, network TV doesn't dive into the wound at the depth that streaming is diving into the wound and the flaw. However, even to get on network TV, showing the ability to go there is a huge part of the creative process. So I think people have fear in exploring the wound and the flaw because they don't want to explore wound and flaws in their own life. And yet, we all have wounds, we all have flaws, and we all have a massive well to draw from with these wounds and flaws. And we all have a circle of friends and family who have wounds and flaws. So being conscious of these wounds and flaws and how they connect you to people is what you want to do in your writing.
Cool. Hope that answered your question, Mugs. I know, Jen, you know Mugs well.
Yes, I do. Mugs is fantastic.
And here's another question. The full name hasn't come out, but the question is, are you finding scripts written as features being reformatted for TV due to COVID situation? So that's the question, but I think maybe we can look at that in two ways, maybe because of COVID and maybe just generally. I know I've done that, so that's actually a great question for me because I'm interested to know how many other people also do that. Yeah.
Well, yes. I mean, the value of taking the feature and adapting it into a TV show is that you already have the world and you have the central character. And you have the character dynamics and you have a large portion of it figured out. The difference, massive difference, is do you have an engine of story that can go the distance? Do you have central conflicts that create longevity and make us see this as a season worth of episodes or several seasons worth of episodes? I work with many writers on, I would say 30% of the writers I work with are feature writers, and many of them end up adapting their scripts into TV scripts or starting to write a TV script from scratch and learning, because there are many parallels, but there are also many differences. And so certainly this time with COVID and the pandemic gives people energy and an availability to do this. So the question is, does your feature have an engine to merit being a series? Or would it benefit you to start from the concept with a new idea and learn the system of what it is to write a TV pilot. That's just what you need to ask yourself with this process.
Yeah, and limited series, if the feature doesn't like kind of have enough strength to go into full series, do you see a lot of limited series then, or do they kind of just steer away from it altogether?
Well, the initial intent for the limited series was to get huge stars for a short amount of time. And there also was, they didn't have the pressure, and many, because they're sold by huge showrunners, will go straight to series with a limited series because they develop the concept in such a way where they sell the series. So there is a value to that. There are many limited series who, after one season, people want more. Big Little Lies is a perfect example of that. The C Word, which was one of the original limited series, is another example of that. And that started with one season because they had huge stars. And then it went to a second season because the concept was worthy. Now, there are shows where, like The Queen's Gambit, where specifically because of the concept and the arc of exploration, it's done in a season. Now, I have seen, I saw an interview with is it Anya Taylor, the lead actress, I believe. I hope I'm not getting her name wrong, but I saw an interview where she mentioned that people are talking about they want, yes, Anna Joy Taylor, thank you, where they're talking about she's saying, I haven't heard anything but never say never, because she, obviously there are things to explore. So I think it is easier to go into a limited series with the idea of one season if it's a concept where it's essentially, the limited series is almost like a long feature. It gives you more opportunity to explore in depth the concept. So you have a beginning, a middle, and an end from the start, which is great for writers and creators to have that. And then, if, like, when I watched Big Little Lies, what I recognized at the end of that season was, wow, it's almost like season one could be the backstory for season two, because we are connected to these characters through this trauma. So now you could go to a season two because of that. So it all depends on the idea and how it's explored. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. That was actually my question, so you answered it perfectly.
Okay.
So there's another question here. Guys, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask you to put all your questions in the chat. So please just type them out and I'll pick them up as best I can. And so Rani says here, trending now are many hybrid genres. True story. What should we not do when venturing down that path in our scripts? I'm not sure I quite understand.
Well, I mean, first of all, there are different schools of thoughts. There are many people saying, what should I not do in a story concept? And what should I not explore? And there are writers who have a specific, or development executives who will say things like, don't explore period pieces, which is very confusing to writers because many of the streaming shows are period pieces that are working. Then you'll hear, don't use VOs, don't use flashbacks. Yet in many of the shows that end up going to Emmys, going to Golden Globes, you have VOs and flashbacks. So really what the bottom line to think about is what serves the concept. Don't go to places that don't serve the concept and the story that you are trying to tell. And I'm of the belief that don't try to sell to the market, because trends go so quickly that by the time you get something ready, it's on to the next trend. You have to write what you feel that you can hit out of the ballpark because of your emotional well that you are going to fictionalize into the concept.
That's a great thing to hear, I think, for many writers, because everybody feels like maybe they failing because they're not writing what the market wants. So yeah, that's true. And Ronnie also just made me think, when she's talking about all these many hybrid genres and stuff, a lot of writers, there's different schools of thought whether you should stick to one genre or you should write different genres. In your experience, which kind of writers, if they stick to one or have many, become more successful?
Okay, so the school of thought, and which is, so in the feature world, we know you don't have to stick to a genre until you have success. And once you have success, then the ideology is stick to the brand. Judd Apatow is a perfect example of this, because then you can create this plethora of films based on the idea of the brand. In television, the feel is that if you're a female character driven writer, then stay in that brand. If you are a procedural writer, then stay in that brand and don't go into writing like a dramedy, which conflicts with the agent's ability to sell you as a procedural writer. However, for me, I'm coming from a former current programming executive worldview. And I know that when I was a current executive, if I loved a writer and I was staffing 5 shows that were all extremely different, I wanted a writer who had different things in their writing portfolio so that I could put them up for more than one show.
That's very interesting. Yeah, no, that's great. And that's nice to know, because that's like the real world. So that means a lot. So Gavin asks, how much does like your personality or a professional script consultant, your worldview, affect your assessment of a script?
That is an excellent question. So worldview in every aspect of the creative process affects things. So obviously, when you have the worldview of whether it's going to be a script consultant, whether it's going to be the executive reading it, whether it's going to be the executive producer reading it, worldview matters. When, the idea of what themes are you going to touch on, and you're going to have the reader's worldview connect to your themes, which is why it's tremendously important for you to explore themes that are universal. And the more universal your themes are, the greater opportunity you have to connect with a larger amount of people in that process. So certainly with a reader, or I see this all the time with writers on the verge. I mean, when I'll look at, and what we have found with the process is, if there is a script that gets very high, 2 different readers read all the scripts. So if there's a high score and a low score, then that tells you right there that the worldview of the reader, one identified, the other did not. And so very often then another reader will be chosen to find out where it falls. So worldview of be it the reader, story consultant, agent, manager, executive producer, executive, does go into play. You're going to have many managers who are not going to want the writer to explore different topics, and this could go into the market, but this also could go into the worldview of the manager. So writers have to learn to navigate this.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I'm not even going to ask you the question because I'm sure you've got a favorite genre, unless you want
Right.
to answer that. But
Oh no, I'll answer that. I mean,
okay,
I like great stories. So for me, a great story. When I was an executive, I covered shows from Beverly Hills 90210 to Numbers to the 4400 to Medium to Girlfriends. So a very wide amount. I devour international shows. Now, I would say the genre that I love the most is the political international thriller type of show is something that I love. I love the character driven procedural. I love the dramedy that takes a deep dive into the wound and the flaw through a concept and a world that is something that I'm fascinated with. So for me, story is more important than genre. If the story is there, I'm willing to go into any genre and be taken there.
Okay, cool. So Nick asks here, after applying, okay, so I don't know if you score scripts, but here's the question. After applying the feedback from script consultants, how much value does a studio executive or producer place in positive coverage, like the consider, recommend, those score sheets?
So I can
from
only tell you,
well-known coverage services. So if the services are reputable and they get the consider or recommends, what do you think?
I can only speak from my experience on that. From my experience on that, that did not weigh into my process of the staffing process. However, I do feel since I was an executive, which was 2007, since then, there have been some script covered services that are very high ended, that involve former executives, agents, managers that are pouring energy into that becoming more valuable. So I do think depending on the coverage place, just like just like people stress and worry about, oh my God, if I don't get into the diversity program, will I ever staff? And the answer is, of course you will. I staffed a gazillion writers and helped launch a ton of writing careers that didn't come through the diversity programs. However, the diversity programs are one channel to get to the outcome, just like this is a channel by getting a recommend. Now, and there are many executives who will say, no, I don't give any thought to that. And there are other executives who will say, just like if you're a semifinalist or finalist in a writing program, it weighs in the same way. You look at the overall picture of the writer. Hollywood is based on if other people like you, I like you. That's what Hollywood is based on. So any proof that you can give that other people like you does have value. It's just depending on the executive, how much value.
This reminds me of something Wendy West said. Wendy West is another mentor on the Safari, and Jen actually knows her really well. She said that one of the things when she's looking at writers is the bio, is the actual person behind it. And she just gave this great example about someone wrote that they were a pig farmer or something. And she's like, I really want to read what this writer writes about. So, it wasn't only about just the quality of the writing, it was also about the person. So it's true to what you say.
Well, and Wendy, first of all, Wendy is a outstanding writer. So Wendy is, and she's also a person who believes in mentoring writers and helping writers. So I love that she shared that insight. I know in a similar fashion, Moira Kurland, who did one of my podcasts, she said, when I'm meeting 20 writers a day, What I remember is their story. So when you go into these meetings, I always tell writers, go into a meeting with three intentions. When you go into a meeting with three intentions, which very often will be three of your biggest marketing points of what you want to sell of your story. And certainly, for example, if you're going to meet on a medical show and you have any kind of medical background or trauma in your background that connects with having an appreciation for the medical world, then you want to share this. So it's always knowing what parts of your story will have a parallel with what the executive is staffing or what they are looking for to sell. So it's doing your research with that.
No, that's great. And then maybe just quickly, I know lots of the people here will know this, but the Writers on the Verge, that program, can people outside LA apply for that? And do they get weighted differently if they are not in LA?
Well, and that's a great question. What you have to recognize is that because of the pandemic, writers, everything's changing. So suddenly we have writers remotely all over the world. I can tell you with Writers on the Verge this year, we did it virtually. We had writers in New York, we had a writer in Austin, as well as the Los Angeles writers. That was a first. We've never had that. We've had writers from New York get into Writers on the Verge, and then they have to move to Los Angeles. And we have not had, in my 12 years, we have not had writers from other countries get into Writers on the Verge. We have not had that. But I do believe that with people recognizing that now writers can be anywhere, and writing rooms are now working remotely all over the place. So the hope is that the world becomes smaller and opportunity is really about finding the best writer for the job. So the hope is that that becomes a part of the new normal when we get back into some type of normalcy.
That's great because I mean, I know before it was almost like it was in the terms and conditions that if you
Right.
did, get on the program, you had to move to LA. So, so now that opens up other opportunities for us over here as well, which is cool. So here's a question. Can't see. Dominique, how do you structure a first season or limited series arc when writing the pilot?
Okay, so that's everything that my story system goes into. So you're looking with your series arc, a very compelling series trigger and dilemma where you have a question coming out of it. An example of this is Homeland. The question driving season 1 in Homeland is Brody the prisoner of war that turned, or isn't he? And in the pilot arc, we go one step toward that answer. And then in the season arc, every other episode could be yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, until we get to the answer. So that's an excellent example of a show that has an incredible series arc as well as pilot arc as well as season arc.
Maybe just to touch on that, Dominique, when I first spoke to Jen, I almost didn't understand this whole new jargon. And then I took the tele, and she kept saying to me, just do the tele seminar, do the tele seminar. And then I did it, and I was like, a light bulb went off completely. So, so for any new writers, that was very, that was a light bulb moment. So, and speaking of the tele seminar, you and I actually set this date, like literally in November for today. And coincidentally, I think your deadline is tomorrow.
My deadline is tomorrow for the price changing, for the price going to
Ah,
regular rate.
okay.
So, so tomorrow, right now we have 164 writers from all over the world that are in the community for my 2021 Storywise event, which includes my finding story instruction modules. I put 6 months into this product of story instruction modules where there are 9 shows that I give you full breakdowns for each show. I've never done that. So 6 months went into the story instruction, and then the live portion of the Storywise teleseminar begins a week from tomorrow. So you do the absolute deadline to sign in, I mean, to get a spot is February 15th. That's
Okay.
the absolute deadline to get into the 2021 Storywise teleseminar. I didn't even think to grab a link, so I'll grab a link when somebody else is answering or asking a question.
Okay. So yeah, that's the price change then tomorrow. So maybe, yeah. So if anyone wants to join Jen on her tele seminar, or you can also obviously come to the Screenwriters Safari, and we can all bond in person. Which
Well, we have to go into that, Eve. We have to talk about
yes,
that.
yes. So yeah, Jen, I couldn't be more excited that you're coming.
I am
And
beyond excited. All
yeah,
right,
so
here I'm gonna put the, let's see, panelists and attendees. Okay, so I'm putting the link for the Storywise teleseminar, and then the Safari. So I'm beyond excited. I want to take a dive into helping people understand the value of doing an event like the Safari. And Eve, I think you should share your inspiration because you went to another retreat and that
yeah,
inspired you to
yes.
do this.
So the reason that I actually went to a conference in Atlanta, and that was the first screenwriting event I ever attended. And I thought I really want to do a conference in South Africa because first of all, it's a really cool place, and I just wanted to share it with other people. And I wanted all these writers and these panelists and people to come here and share all this knowledge with local people as well, and for us to all get together. And then I went to a retreat, and I realized, no, I don't want to do a conference anymore. I want to do something that is intimate, because what I realized, and this was disappointing for me when I went to the conference, was that I had expectations that I was maybe going to speak to these panelists. Okay, I was ignorant. But I realized you can't talk to them. You can only sit in an audience and ask a question, and you don't ever get an opportunity to talk about your own stuff. And that is why I just love this format, where everybody gets to talk about their own projects in depth, with a committed ear, and other people who are just as wanting to see your success as you do. And for me, the best part is that you make friends, and my belief is obviously people want to see friends succeed, and they help them along the way, and you bond and share. So that's why I put this together. And I thought, like, a lot of I know you haven't been to South Africa, and actually all the mentors haven't been to South Africa. So so that's really cool. So it'll be a first time for everybody, and I wanted to kind of do it as like a bucket list item, as well as everybody kind of bonding and doing the mentorships. So yeah, so that's happening in September, and come hell or high water, I know we've got challenges in the world and all of that, but we just got to work around them. And I do believe that it is going to happen, and I can't wait.
Well, and what people have to recognize, like with the creative process and being somewhere that you haven't been before, like most people haven't seen is that tremendous picture you have of the elephant. Most people haven't experienced that in their life. So the idea of combining the creative process with nature at a time in the world when nature is what our soul is hungering for, and nature is what is getting us through everything that is going on. And this is an opportunity to experience, my experience of retreats and doing seminars around the world is that you end up, these are experiences that will live in your heart forever. These are connections, these are friendships. This is a community that could benefit you in a tremendous way. So, and it's the reason I love doing them. And so when you approached me about this, I was beyond excited because I know your love for the experience, and I know that your brilliant concept of combining the creative aspect of the retreat and putting it in a setting that is mind blowing and offering an opportunity for people to network is everything.
Yes.
Do you see Lucinda's question? Does the safari include a daily writer's workshop where pages are read aloud and discussed?
So there is a daily workshop, and each mentor will obviously decide how they're going to run their little group. There's only going to be 3 people per person. So, I mean, 4 people per mentor. So it'll be very intimate. And I mean, Jen, you've got your process, and whatever I think is the strongest benefit for the writers is probably what those mentors are going to do. Maybe you can talk about your process.
Yeah, so my process is for the 4 mentees that I work with. I will get your submission, your script submission before, several weeks before the event. So I will go through your scripts. Then what we'll do on each day is one writer will be covered, and as a group, so that we have the writer's room experience. We will go through the notes and we will talk about the script. We will talk about the notes. Each of the other mentees will have an opportunity to share their thoughts. So all of the mentees in each group, in my group, will be responsible for reading the other mentees' material as well. So this is everything I do in Writers on the Verge. It started with there, it went into my Storywise teleseminar, and it is just a part of my process that I find is tremendously beneficial so that writers can go to an event like this and have something to take home. Now, also, the focus of this specific event is more on networking. So we're not going to have the same kind of time to go into massive detail because of the daily safari stuff, which will also be a part of the creative process. You will get written notes from me, so you will get those. You will also get the verbal input on the concept in the group sessions.
Yeah. So I think many of the mentors will work similarly. Yeah, there'll be long days because we have to see animals and then eat and bond and mentor and then eat some more and then see some more animals, and so it'll go. But guys, yeah, it's been an hour. So, and I know it's Monday morning, so I hope that was useful to many of you. I always learn new things from Jen. And yeah, if you guys are interested, there is an early bird discount still on the Screenwriters Safari.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.